The water sample in my hand looked normal, crystal clear. But I knew better. My son was dying, and this seemingly innocent liquid was the culprit. Here I was, a single mother, an environmental scientist, trespassing on corporate property at 2 a.m. Security would make their rounds again in exactly 7 minutes. I had to move quickly. The chain-link fence behind me had shredded my jacket and left a thin line of blood on my forearm, but that was the least of my concerns. My phone vibrated in my pocket. The babysitter, probably. Tommy had been having seizures more frequently. The doctors were puzzled. But I wasn't. As I collected another sample from the drainage pipe, I heard the distinct sound of boots crunching on gravel. Flashlight beams swept across the trees about 100 yards away. Earlier than expected. Damn it. I screwed the cap on the vial, shoved it into my backpack, and ran toward the forest line. My heart pounded in my chest, but not from the exertion. From the knowledge that if Blackwell Chemical discovered what I was doing, my career would be over. And in a town where they employed nearly 70% of the workforce, being their enemy meant becoming everyone's enemy. But when your child's life is at stake, you'd risk anything. Even becoming the most hated person in Riverdale, Louisiana. 3 months earlier, life had been normal. Well, as normal as it could be for a 35-year-old environmental scientist raising a 10-year-old boy alone in a small Louisiana town. "Mom, can I go fishing with Billy today?" Tommy had asked that fateful Saturday morning, his freckled face peering up at me over a bowl of cereal. His unruly auburn hair, so like his father's, needed a trim, but Tommy protested every time I mentioned it. "Did you finish your science project?" I asked, pouring myself another cup of coffee. The exhaustion from my 60-hour work weeks at the Environmental Assessment Office never quite went away. Almost. I just need to glue the last part of the solar system. Neptune keeps falling off. I smiled, ruffling his hair. "Okay, fishing after the project is done. But be back before dark and stay away from the South Bank." The south bank of the Riverdale Creek was closest to Blackwell Chemicals plant, and something about the water there had been bothering me professionally for weeks. Nothing concrete, just pH levels that fluctuated more than they should. "Mom, that's where the biggest catfish are," he protested. "Tommy, please. Just humor your paranoid mother, okay?" He rolled his eyes but nodded. "Fine. North Bank only." If only I had been more insistent. If only I had forbidden fishing altogether. If only I had paid more attention to those inconsistent pH readings instead of being distracted by budget cuts and staff reductions. 2 weeks later, Tommy came home from school with a nosebleed that wouldn't stop. Then came the headaches, the fatigue, the seizures. And finally, the diagnosis that wasn't a diagnosis at all. "We're not sure what's causing his symptoms, Ms. Johnson," Dr. Rivera had said, her expression professionally concerned, but her eyes betraying something more troubling. "Fear? Hesitation? We'd like to run more tests." That same week, I received a call from Ellie Tanner, whose husband had worked at the fishing docks for 30 years. "Sarah," she whispered over the phone, her voice trembling. "Frank's gone. Cancer. Just like Jim Belden last month. And Pete Wilkins before him. All worked the South Docks. All handled fish from the South Creek." She paused, and I could hear her shaky breath. "The hospital reports are calling them unrelated incidents." That night, I pulled out my old water testing kit and drove to the South Bank. "Ms. Johnson, I understand your concerns, but there's simply no evidence supporting your theory." Mayor Wilson's office was oppressively hot despite the air conditioning. Or maybe it was just the way he looked at me, a mixture of pity and irritation, as if I were a hysterical woman rather than a scientist with a master's degree from Georgia Tech. "With all due respect, Mayor, I've done the tests myself. The mercury levels in those water samples are conducted with what equipment?" he interrupted. "In what lab? Following what protocols?" He leaned forward, his imposing frame making his oak desk seem small. "Sarah, you're upset about Tommy. We all are." He's a wonderful boy. But accusing Blackwell Chemical of illegal dumping without proper evidence is not just irresponsible, it's potentially libelous. I'm not making accusations. I'm requesting an official investigation, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. 3 fishermen dead from rare cancers. 5 children with unexplained neurological symptoms. All living within a mile of the South Creek. That can't be coincidence. He sighed, steepling his fingers. Blackwell Chemical provides 1,200 jobs in this town. They donate to our schools, our hospital, our police department. They've been here for 40 years without incident. Without reported incident, I corrected. The mayor's face hardened. I'll tell you what, Sarah. Submit a formal request through proper channels. If the environmental agency approves an investigation, my office won't stand in the way. We both knew what that meant. The Regional Environmental Office had 3 employees covering 4 counties and a backlog of cases stretching back years. By the time they got to my request, Tommy could be. I couldn't even finish the thought. Absolutely not, Brad Harrison said, crossing his arms. As the head of the local hospital's lab, he was my last hope for getting the water samples properly analyzed without raising flags at Blackwell. Brad, please, I begged, abandoning all pretense of professional detachment. I just need an analysis of 3 water samples. That's it. Using hospital equipment, violating protocols, potentially putting my job at risk, he listed off. For what? Some environmental crusade? For Tommy, I said quietly. And possibly for other children who are getting sick and don't know why. Brad's expression softened slightly. He treated Tommy for a bee sting last summer, had seen him around town. Sarah, I sympathize, but Blackwell funds half our new oncology wing. If I start running unauthorized tests that could implicate them. So you do think they might be responsible? I pressed. He looked away. I didn't say that. But you're thinking it. Come on, Brad. You're a doctor. You've taken an oath to do no harm. Isn't ignoring this potentially doing harm? He was silent for a long moment. I can't help you officially, he finally said. But my brother works at the State University lab in Baton Rouge. He might be willing to run some tests. Off the record. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small flame of hope flickered inside me. The results came back 3 days later. My hands trembled as I opened the email attachment. Water sample analysis. Confidential sample 1. Control within normal parameters. Sample 2. South Creek mercury levels 18x above acceptable limits. PCB contamination present. Sample 3. Drainage area mercury levels 37x above acceptable limits. PCB contamination critical. Additional heavy metal contaminants detected. There it was. Proof. I printed the report, my mind racing with next steps. The State Environmental Agency. The press. Maybe even the EPA. That's when my phone rang. Ms. Johnson? This is Riverdale Elementary. Tommy's had another seizure. We've called an ambulance. The world tilted sideways. Mom, am I going to die? Tommy's voice, small and fragile, cut through me like a knife. We were in his hospital room, the beeping of monitors and the antiseptic smell creating a sterile cocoon around us. His face was pale, his eyes sunken. He'd lost 9 pounds in 3 weeks. No, baby, I said firmly, squeezing his hand. Absolutely not. We're going to figure this out. But the doctors still had no answers, only more tests and concerned glances. I hadn't shown them the water analysis yet. I needed more proof, something undeniable. The other kids at school say I have the Riverdale shakes, he said, attempting a smile. Like I'm starting a new dance trend. I tried to return his smile while blinking back tears. My brave boy. Always finding humor. Very fashionable, I managed to say. But I think we need to get you feeling better before you start your pop star career. His face grew serious. Is it because of the fish? Billy's dad says no one should eat anything from the South Creek anymore. So the locals were starting to make connections too. That was both encouraging and terrifying. Maybe, I said carefully. I'm looking into it. Are you going to fight the chemical plant? Mrs. Peterson says they're too powerful to fight. I brushed the hair from his forehead. Sometimes you have to fight even when you might not win, Tommy. Especially then. He nodded, his eyelids growing heavy from the medication. Like David and Goliath, he murmured before drifting off to sleep. Like David and Goliath indeed. Except I didn't even have a slingshot yet. The following week brought two developments. First, Brad's brother called to say the university lab would no longer analyze my samples. They'd received a sizable donation from Blackwell's parent company with the stipulation that they avoid entanglement in unsubstantiated local environmental disputes. Second, I was called into my supervisor's office at the Environmental Assessment Office. Sarah, I'll be direct, Richard said, not meeting my eyes. We're implementing budget cuts. We have to let you go. I stared at him in disbelief. Budget cuts? Richard, I've been here for 7 years. I have seniority over half the department. It's not about seniority. It's about... He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. It's about my investigation into Blackwell. I finished for him. He didn't deny it. You've been collecting samples without authorization, making inquiries using your official position because children are getting sick, Richard. Because people are dying. And if you have proof, take it to the proper authorities, he snapped. But you've been using office resources for a personal vendetta? A personal vendetta? I interrupted, my voice rising. My son can barely walk across his room without getting exhausted. He had 3 seizures last week. This isn't personal, it's criminal. Richard's expression was a mixture of sympathy and resignation. 2 weeks severance. Clean out your desk by end of day. I walked out without another word, my mind already shifting to a new plan. Without my job, I had nothing left to lose. Ms. Johnson, this is Daniel Reeves from the New Orleans Tribune. I got your message about potential environmental contamination in Riverdale. The call came as I was researching environmental law firms. With my savings rapidly depleting and Tommy's medical bills mounting, I needed to move quickly. Yes, Mr. Reeves. I have evidence of serious contamination from Blackwell Chemical. Mercury, PCBs, and other toxins at levels dozens of times above legal limits. And you're a local environmental scientist? I corrected. Until I started investigating Blackwell. He made an interested sound. They fired you over this? That could be part of the story. The story is children getting sick and fishermen dying of rare cancers, I said firmly. My employment status is secondary. Of course, he agreed. Can you send me your evidence? Water analyses, medical reports, anything documenting a pattern. I hesitated. The water analysis was my only hard evidence, and even that was unofficial. I'm gathering more comprehensive documentation, I said carefully. But people are suffering now. This can't wait for a perfect case. There was a pause. Ms. Johnson, environmental contamination is a serious accusation. Without substantial evidence, my son is in the hospital, I cut in. His doctors are baffled. 5 other children in his school have similar symptoms. All live near water connected to Blackwell's drainage system. Isn't that worth investigating? It is, he acknowledged. But we need more than correlation. Do you have internal documents from Blackwell? Whistleblowers? Historical testing showing a pattern. I didn't. Not yet. After the call ended, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by maps of local waterways, medical reports, and newspaper clippings about Blackwell Chemical. There had to be a way to prove what they were doing. That's when I remembered Mark Ellis. He'd worked as an engineer at Blackwell for 20 years before retiring 3 years ago. And he'd never struck me as a company man. Mark's house was at the edge of town, a modest place with a large vegetable garden and no visible neighbors. Perfect for a conversation that needed privacy. I've been expecting someone like you, he said after I explained why I was there. His weathered face showed no surprise, only resignation. Been waiting 3 years for someone to start asking the right questions. We sat on his back porch, the humid Louisiana air thick around us. Mark sipped his iced tea, his eyes distant. I tried reporting it through internal channels, he said quietly. Their environmental compliance officer, the plant manager, even wrote to corporate headquarters. Got nowhere. Then my wife got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Rare for someone with no risk factors. He set down his glass, his hand trembling slightly. She died 14 months later. I took early retirement, told myself there was nothing I could prove anyway. But there is, I pressed. You know where they're dumping. You know what chemicals they're using. He nodded slowly. The official waste management system is state-of-the-art. They show it off to inspectors, politicians, everyone. But in 2017, they installed a secondary drainage system. Unmarked pipes that run deep, bypassing all monitoring systems. They only use it at night, usually between 1 and 3 a.m., and only when production demands exceed what they can legally process. My heart raced. Do you have documentation? Anything on paper? Better, he said, standing up with effort. I have photographs. And I kept a log of every night they used the system during my last year there. He disappeared into the house and returned with a manila envelope. I made copies, he said, handing it to me. The originals are with my lawyer, to be released if anything happens to me. The implications of his statement sent a chill down my spine. Be careful, Sarah, he warned. Blackwell isn't just a company here. They own this town in ways you can't imagine. Armed with Mark's evidence, I went back to Daniel Reeves. This time, he was interested. This is compelling, he said after reviewing the photos and logs. I'd like to send a photographer to document the current state of these drainage areas. And we should interview other former employees. Will you publish the story? I asked. We need to verify everything first, but yes, I think we have enough to move forward. It will take a couple of weeks to do proper due diligence. Weeks Tommy might not have. His latest blood tests showed deteriorating liver function, and the neurologist had mentioned the possibility of permanent damage. How quickly can you work? I pressed. Environmental stories require careful handling, Ms. Johnson. Blackwell's parent company is a major corporation with powerful attorneys. We need to be certain. I understood journalism had protocols, but Tommy didn't have time for protocols. None of the affected children did. That night, I made a decision. If the official channels were too slow, I'd create pressure another way. The Facebook group, Riverdale Water Watch, started with just me. By the end of the first day, we had 27 members. After a week, over 200, in a town of just 5,000. I shared what I could without compromising the coming news story or Mark's safety. General information about water contamination, symptoms to watch for, questions to ask doctors. People began sharing their own stories, mysterious illnesses, fish kills, gardens that wouldn't grow near certain creeks. Melissa Tanner, Ellie's daughter, posted photos of her father before and after his illness. The stark contrast was heartbreaking. Then came the pushback. Anonymous accounts claiming I was creating hysteria to pursue a personal grievance after being fired. Rumors that I was working for a competing chemical company. Even suggestions that Tommy's illness was fabricated. The town divided along predictable lines. Those financially dependent on Blackwell defended the company fiercely. Those with sick family members or environmental concerns rallied behind our cause. The mayor called a town hall meeting to address unsubstantiated rumors concerning water quality. It was clearly meant to reassure people and diminish our concerns, but I saw it as an opportunity. The community center was packed. I sat in the back, Tommy's empty wheelchair beside me. He was back in the hospital after his worst seizure yet. Mayor Wilson started with prepared statements from Blackwell chemical executives and state environmental officials, all assuring the townspeople that water quality tests showed no cause for concern. These tests, I called out when he finished, standing up. When were they conducted? And were they announced in advance? A murmur ran through the crowd. The mayor looked annoyed, but gestured to a man in a suit, Jeffrey Blackwell himself, grandson of the founder and current CEO. Our facility operates under strict environmental protocols, Blackwell said smoothly. We conduct regular testing and maintain transparency with all regulatory bodies. That's not what I asked, I persisted. Were the tests announced in advance? Did Blackwell know exactly when inspectors would arrive and what they would be testing for? Blackwell's smile tightened. Ms. Johnson, isn't it? I understand you're going through a difficult time with your son and you're looking for someone to blame. But spreading unfounded accusations isn't helpful to anyone. Answer the question, Mr. Blackwell, came a voice from across the room. It was Ellie Tanner, standing straight despite her grief. Did you know when they were coming? More voices joined in, demanding answers. The carefully orchestrated meeting was slipping out of the mayor's control. People, please, Mayor Wilson called over the growing noise. This isn't productive, show them the photos. Sarah, someone called. It was Mark Ellis in the back corner. He looked terrified but determined. The room quieted. All eyes turned to me. I hadn't planned to reveal everything yet, not before the Tribune published their investigation. But looking around at my neighbors, some hostile, some hopeful, all affected by what was happening, I knew it was time. I pulled out enlarged copies of Mark's photographs and held them up one by one. Drainage pipes not on any official map. Workers in hazmat suits operating pumps at 2 a.m. Chemical barrels with warning labels being emptied directly into unmarked containers. These were taken by a former Blackwell engineer, I announced. He documented illegal dumping over a period of years. And I have water sample analyses showing toxic levels of mercury, PCBs, and other chemicals in the creeks where our children play and our fishermen work. The room erupted. Parents who'd seen their children suffering symptoms similar to Tommy's surged forward to see the evidence. Blackwell employees looked stunned or angry. The mayor frantically tried to restore order. Through the chaos, I locked eyes with Jeffrey Blackwell. His face showed no shock or outrage, only cold calculation. He knew. He'd always known. The story broke in the New Orleans Tribune 3 days later, appearing simultaneously online and in print. Toxic Legacy, Louisiana town poisoned by corporate negligence, screamed the headline. Daniel Reeves had done his job thoroughly. In addition to Mark's evidence and my water samples, he'd found 2 other former employees willing to speak anonymously. He'd uncovered a pattern of campaign contributions to officials responsible for environmental oversight. Most damning of all, he'd obtained internal memos discussing the cost efficiency of occasional fines for violations versus the expense of proper waste disposal. The story was picked up by national outlets. By the end of the week, CNN and MSNBC had crews in Riverdale. The EPA announced an emergency investigation. Class action lawyers descended on the town like vultures, unpleasant but necessary scavengers. Blackwell Chemical issued denials, then clarifications, then a carefully worded statement about isolated incidents of procedural failures. They announced a temporary suspension of operations pending a full internal review. Too little, too late. 6 months later, I stood on the banks of the South Creek. The water was clearer now, though comprehensive remediation would take years. The EPA had found contamination levels even higher than my initial tests indicated. Tommy sat in a folding chair nearby, his fishing rod propped beside him, catch and release only for now, but someday the fish would be safe to eat again. His recovery was slow but steady. The doctors were optimistic that he'd avoid permanent damage, though regular testing would continue for years. Blackwell Chemical had been forced to establish a medical fund for affected residents. The criminal investigation into their executives was ongoing. The plant remained closed, and the economic impact on Riverdale was severe, businesses closing, families moving away, property values plummeting. Many in town still blamed me for the hardship. I received occasional hate mail and dirty looks at the grocery store. But for every angry former Blackwell employee, there was a parent of a recovering child who stopped me to say thank you. Do you think the water will ever be completely clean again, Mom? Tommy asked, watching a blue heron stalk through the shallows. I don't know, honey, I answered honestly. Some damage can't be undone entirely, but it can get better if people care enough to make it happen. He nodded thoughtfully. Like your new job? After the story broke, I'd been offered a position with a national environmental watchdog organization, specifically to investigate similar situations in other industrial towns. It meant traveling, but it also meant making a difference on a larger scale. Exactly like that, I said, smiling at him. I'm proud of you, he said simply, for not giving up when everyone said you should. My throat tightened with emotion. My brave, wise boy. I couldn't give up, I told him. Not when you were counting on me. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over a town forever changed, damaged, but beginning to heal. The battle had cost us nearly everything, but we'd won something precious, truth. And where there's truth, there's always hope. The fight for clean water, for accountability, for justice, it doesn't end with one company in one town. It continues everywhere corporate profits are valued above human lives. But now I know that one person with enough determination can tip the first domino. And sometimes, that's all it takes to start a revolution. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.